Hi, and welcome back to another episode of BRF Shorts On Us.
Hi guys.
These are the shorter versions of our longer episodes for those people who want content in appetizing chunks. So the word for today is whiskey. Now, usually we, take an audience suggested word, or we pick one at random that we think would be really interesting, but there's a reason for this one, and we'll tell you later. So find out at the end of the episode why we chose this word. It's super exciting, not only for us, but also for you.
Yeah, it is.
So, in Scotland, because we're talking about whiskey, so we've got to talk about Scotland.
Yeah.
It's customary to drink quite a lot of whiskey at a funeral, and that's not surprising, I don't think, to anybody. In fact, there's this...
The Scottish drink whiskey? Yes, I don't think that's surprising at all.
Yeah. So apparently there's a saying that goes, a Scottish funeral is often merrier than an English wedding. So this is a story about the funeral of a certain Miss Jelly. I don't know where that came from. I'm really sorry. But Miss Jessie Colquhoun of Angus. Now, it was customary in all these small hamlets and villages and towns for the community to all gather together and accompany the deceased in her coffin to various pubs across the town or hamlet on their way to the church where she would be finally interred.
Quite a funeral party in more ways than one.
Yeah, exactly. So, these people, they carry along Miss Jessie, and at each stop, which is at each inn they would stop at, she would be laid upon lacquer stains. These are apparently flat stones designed for just such a job, which is a very specific reason to create a flat stone outside an inn. Now, they do all this, they go to all the inns, they celebrate her life and drink a lot. And then they arrive at the church and it's now nearing sunset. They apologize to the gravedigger for being late and then realize that they've left Miss Jessie behind at some point during their journey. So the
coffin has got left at a bar, basically?
Somewhere. Yeah, somewhere. And so they send 6 of the youngest and most sober boys to retrieve her, obviously. And it's from this story, apparently, that the phrase being late for one's own funeral arose.
Oh, wow.
For no fault of her own, poor thing.
Yeah, she may have been a perfectly punctual person through her life.
She's beyond blame.
And now her legacy is... Poor thing.
Yeah.
For my segment, I just decided to sort of go into and see if in all of the history of whiskey, which is this whole man, drink, was there ever a point in the
drink?
Like it is. Like I feel like whiskey is like this thing that's just associated with a lot of testosterone. Mm-hmm. But I'm generalizing, of course, based on
backtracking.
I did kind of very badly.
Nobody's gonna come after you.
So in the history of whiskey, I wanted to kind of go back into it and see, women who had been involved in the legacy of whiskey ever, and I came across these two, the story is about one particular distillery, but these two women who ran it at different periods, and it's just absolutely fascinating.
Okay.
This is a story of Helen and Elizabeth Cumming, who were two Scotswomen, and this is a story that dates back to the 18th century. Now, in the 18th century, taxes on whiskey were raised exponentially because the English were trying to control production of whiskey in Scotland. And the laws got incredibly confusing after a point. No distillery was really being charged the same rate. And at some point, the taxes just became unmanageable for most. So by the end of the century, as is the case when, politicians come in and mess everything up, there was a flourishing black market for whiskey and distilleries all over Scotland. And one of them was spearheaded by Helen Cumming. Now, Helen Cumming was 34 when her husband, John, leased a small farm in Scotland, somewhere near the River Spey, and they named their new home Cardow. And like many of the other neighbors, they set up an illicit distillery. John used to work the farm, Helen would take care of the household and the whiskey, Not only did she work the stills, she was also the first recorded woman to ever do so and was responsible for the product's distribution. So what she would do is that she would walk 20 miles or so to the nearest township of Eglin with the whiskey skins hidden underneath her skirts and then sell them on the streets to whoever was interested. She also sold bottles
20 miles
with like whiskey hanging under her skirts. So quite a trek in more ways than one.
Wow. I would have drank it all. I got there. Does anybody want to purchase a skin? An empty skin?
Yeah, you can fill it with your own whiskey. She would also sell her bottles through the window of her farmhouse to whoever passed by. But now bear in mind, if she was doing this, it's very likely that somebody, like one of the authorities, would walk by and she would get caught. So she had this really clever way in which she converted her whiskey selling window and her farmhouse to sort of double up as a bakery at will. And so when the authorities would come by, she would invite them in for tea and give them scones, and she would just, and even ask them to stay the night because, she was running a perfectly legal bed and breakfast on the surface of it. And then while they were sort of setting up, she would go out into her backyard and either raise a red flag or just hang up her laundry really high. And that would be a signal to all the other distilleries that the authorities were here and they needed to kind of like shut down really quickly. And so basically she was an early bootlegger.
Wow.
Over the years, her husband was eventually convicted 3 times, but she, because Helen was so involved in the running of the business, the distillery thrived, and they became really known for their reputation of the quality of their single malt. Finally, in 1824, taxes were lowered, and one of the first people to ever purchase an official distilling license was Mr. John Gumming. His eldest son, Louis, had by then established a network of contacts, and he helped them expand their distribution. And then Louis got married to Elizabeth, who then became Elizabeth Gumming and then became the second heroine of the story, because when John died in 1846, he left his distillery to Louis because at the time, as per the laws of the time, women were not allowed to own property. So Elizabeth and Louis became a team, and so Elizabeth showed extremely sharp business acumen, and by 1854 the business was flourishing. They were employing people. They had in fact almost stopped running a farm all year round. The farm would only run in the summer, and every other season was used to sort of keep the whiskey making going. In 1872 Louis died, leaving his mother, his wife, and his 4 children behind. And at this point Elizabeth just kind of like swooped in and just took over. She took over the distillery, registered their single malt under the trademark Kardhu, which means Black Rock, which is a single malt that's even available today. And it became an absolute success. Under Elizabeth's management, the production grew steadily, but by 1884, she couldn't meet the high demands for her product anymore. So what she did was, like any good businesswoman, is that she gave up her distillery and her current property and then bought 4 acres of land in the neighborhood and then moved her entire whiskey making production to there.
Wow.
Little trivia, the little old building was sold to a small startup distillery at the time called Glenfiddich. So she herself bought 4 acres of land in the neighborhood and set up a much larger distilling center there.
Mad. Wow.
And she conducted the business for nearly 17 years on her own, and at the time when she kind of realized that she needs to retire, she sold the distillery, which was the new distillery that she now set up, to John Walker and Sons, that we now know as Johnnie Walker. But the deal she made ensured that none of her workers would lose their jobs. She negotiated that electricity would be brought to the area as one of the first places in Spey Valley to have electricity. And although she herself retired, she sold only under the condition that her son would be made a board member and he would continue to be involved in the business. And then she went on to buy 100 shares of the company and secured her family's fortune forevermore. And so
wow,
that's
what an
the way.
iron lady.
Yeah, and so like she, 2 women bypassing every possible law to ensure that they can't own property or run a business, basically brought this entire whiskey making legacy to life. And to date, the bottles of Kardhu every label has a picture of a woman with a flag on it.
Wow.
Yeah, so that is the story of how Kardhu some way has inspired Glenfiddich, is the precursor to Johnnie Walker, and still continues to remain a whiskey in its own right today, all because of 2 wonderfully fantastic women.
Speaking of Johnnie Walker, ages ago, I watched this ad. Someone sent it to me. I don't know who. Sorry, can't give you credit. But I watched this ad that was for Johnnie Walker. It's not like a normal ad spot that you'd watch. It's over 5 minutes long, and I made Ragini watch it, and It's fantastic. It has a very famous actor called Robert Carlyle walking down the Scottish countryside telling you a story. And that's all I'm going to say. Here are Ragini's reactions to it, though. Enjoy.
Oh, bagpipes, of course. Oh, a true story, is it? Okay. Oh my god, that Scottish accent. Really? Grocers used to stock whiskey at the time? Oh, hey, they mentioned Cardew. They bought the famed distillery of Cardew, lock, stock and barrel. The story of the design of the label is amazing. There's like this beautiful Scottish scenery and then there's like a bunch, like a pile of TVs. Oh, that's a lovely line. 200 years later and Johnny Walker is still walking. Oh my god, Scotland is beautiful. The scenery in this is just amazing.
Okay, so if that isn't endorsement enough, I don't know what will be. Go watch it.
Okay, since we're on recommendations, I have to recommend this one site I came across. It's called whiskysponge.com. And it is... the tagline for whiskysponge.com is, it's thoroughly absorbing. On her about page, she says that she has been learning about whiskey for the last 6 months and now is an expert. And when she was very emphatically questioned in the comment section about how can she consider herself an expert in 6 months, she said because Whiskey Sponge knows everything, all knowledge has been absorbed. 6 months for Whiskey Sponge is like 20 years for human. So her site includes articles like, I'm going to just rattle through a few article titles. Bomo launches a new drink and drive campaign to absolute success. Gordon and MacPhail can't be bothered to release 81-year-old whiskey, market it at only 80 years of age. And there are like a bunch of gems like this across the blog site. It's amazing. I absolutely recommend you go check it out and get a laugh.
Oh, I love that.
So this is whiskey with a KY, by the way. So Whiskey Sponge.
Ah.
Yeah.
Oh, look at you being nice and enjoying my segment. So, have you noticed when the spelling of whiskey differs on packaging depending on where the whiskey is from?
Yes.
So, I have noticed this. I never looked into it because I don't know why. And when I write the word whiskey, I sometimes write it with a Y, sometimes with an EY, usually with an EY because I like to complicate issues. But the answer to that question of what's with the spelling is that it simply depends on the country that you're in. In Scotland, it's spelled without an E, and in Ireland, it's spelled with an E.
Oh.
So, and this distinction obviously also carried on into the New World. So Americans spell it with an E and Canadians spell it without. How did this come about, you ask? So, to set some kind of context, in the early 1800s, Ireland was the largest spirit market in the United Kingdom. Like, the demand was so high that they had to ramp up production and facilities that did the production to match the demand. In fact, the demand was higher than England, which was at the time, obviously, it has larger landmass, so it had more people, but clearly not very interested in whiskey. So Ireland became the largest producer of spirits in the United Kingdom, and Dublin, which was then the largest market for spirits in Ireland, emerged as a major distilling centre. By 1823, Dublin boasted the 5 largest licensed distilleries in the country. At their peak, these 5 distilleries alone would grow to become the largest in the world, and they had a combined output of almost 10 million gallons per annum.
Wow. Oh, that's a very drunk country, in the end of it.
Yeah. And by 1878, which was 50 years of this happening, the reputation of Dublin whiskey was such that a Scottish distilling firm, and there's quite a rivalry between the two, a Scottish distilling firm, having built a distillery in Dublin, claimed that Dublin whiskey could sell at a premium of 25% over any of the other Irish whiskies. So even though these figures could be inflated for reasons I cannot fathom, but they do give an indication of how, esteemed it was to have a distillery in Dublin and how much money people were making at the time. Now, there's 2 types of distilleries. Ones that use a pot still and one that use a column still. I'm not going to go into the details of that. Let's just say that they're very different, and column stills were renowned to be more efficient because they allowed continuous distillation, which was cheaper for the people producing it. But it did produce a mellow whiskey. So pros and cons. Now, for further context, at the time, which is around the turn of the 20th century, at the time, Ireland was part of the United Kingdom and not a separate state. Scotland had already achieved peace with the English crown in the 18th century, but in Ireland, people felt occupied. So this led to the War of Independence and the separation between the independent Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland. So now the dispute over the correct way of making whiskey led so far that a royal commission had to be set up, and it took 5 years to decide that blended whiskey or column still whiskey may still also be called whiskey. And obviously this did not sit well with the Irish people. They were dissatisfied with the decision, and they were like, okay, to just set ourselves apart, we're going to call ourselves whiskey with an E. And that is where, out of sheer spite, the spelling of whiskey with an E was born. And just a little bonus fact, whiskey, the term is derived from the Scottish Gaelic, which is Ushke Beha, and it means water of life.
That's apt.
So, yeah. So that's a little bit of a nerdy lexicographical aside about whiskey. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Now to the juicy bit, which is, why did we choose? Why do we choose whiskey? We're going to start a new segment called Travel with BRF, where we create more immersive versions of our episodes. Case in point, one half of BRF is going to be in Scotland at some point soon. So, so visit our Instagram, go watch our stories, go watch our IGTV, listen to the episode, have a glass of whiskey, and
enjoy.
Blend all these media together and have a good time.
So we're quite excited about this, because now every time we travel, we've decided we will just take you along with us, and we'll see you in Scotland soon, and then we'll see you the week after that with the full length word. So much happening, guys. See you soon.
See you soon.